Uh, yeah. So if we go to the next area, this is more. This is sort of viewing the entire thing as a whole. All of these different loops, per se. You have this massive um, reinforcing loop right here, where daily active users increases your revenue, which increases your profit, which increases how much you can advertise a day, which increases your users, which increases your like it goes. This is that one's very important, and it is why large developers spend so much on marketing because it is what fuels it's literally this is the gas. This is what provides the gasoline for this engine I was just talking about. Um, and for here, you have the sort of retention loops that I was talking about, where concurrent players encourage returning users, which encourages more daily active users, and then finally, and what I believe is the most, this is what this optimization method I've been teasing about. The that is the campaign duration. That is the actual what's it called? That is how. Sorry, I just zoned out. Anyway, campaign duration. That is how long your campaign is. It is if you advertise X amount of days in a row. And when I say days in a row, that's very important, and we'll get to that. But it is how many days you've advertised in a row. And I would say that the longer a campaign is, the better your daily returning users are. And I'm saying even if you have like that's the interesting part. I'm saying that the longer your campaign is, the better, even if they both have the same budget. I mean, if you blew all of your budget on one day versus spreading it over a longer period of time, I think that actually works better. And so let's go into why. And actually, before we get too deep into that, that reminds me, I never actually explained the discovery section. I think I mislabeled it. I was supposed to talk about that at some point. But yeah, so the discovery stuff right here, discovery players. There's a 0.94 correlation between day one retention rates and discovery players, like new players who appeared without being advertised to. I have no idea why this is. I don't know if it's the Roblox algorithm because I don't know where these players are coming from. But it is shockingly high. Like this is across. So the sample size I used to get this finding was across the last 7 games I worked on, which had enough players go through it to get a respectable sample size. Sorry, a respectable what's it called? Margin of error. And because of that, you kind of see how at around really at the 11% day one retention rate, or just about 1.5% day 7 retention rate, like a switch flips. Like something happens, and you go from you go from bare, like this is logarithmic. Look at the bottom. It goes from like 900 free users a day to 4,000. Like actually 5,000. Like it's a massive jump. And even if I had more data points, I still think it'd be pretty startling how much it ramps up, just because of how predictably, like how small changes below like 5%, that can mean 7 players a day, or that can mean 900. Like, yeah, it's yeah, Anyway, but yeah, no, as Rath points out, like it's a very natural idea to want to blow all your advertising budget early, and I used to do that. But I hope hopefully the slide after this one will be even more impressive. Then be more helpful, because all I want you to know from this one is discovery players. Like the majority of discovery players are influenced through retention. And in fact, I'm not as confident in saying that it doesn't involve any of these other variables, but I did actually run a meta-analysis on the various key performance indicators to see which one of them were influencing each other the most. And the rate and the retention rate was influencing things not only more than any other variables, but wasn't like it's not even influenced by the variables more than that. Like there was no variable which could kind of be implied to be as directly, like could take the crown as most important variable. The closest is average session duration, but even then, like they're so tied together, it's hard to say what does or doesn't matter. But I'm telling you, retention rates, those are how you get players for free. And in fact, if your retention is good enough, you won't even have to buy new users. Like, that's the thing. You can cut out the marketing side. You don't need to spend a ton on marketing after an initial release goes well. My most successful game, which has gotten over 180 million visits, has never run an ad. It has never run an ad. I released it to an audience who liked the previous game, which did run ads. And that initial audience had a high enough retention rate to get the game recommended to new users. Within the first day, it was on the front page. And I didn't spend a single dollar. That is the power of this discovery area. Because you'll find that the discovery users, the users you get for free, are the only way that you can have sort of this cash cow effect where a game is good for years. Because otherwise, you have to have a massive average revenue per user, one to the point where it's absurd. Like, you have to either have a game that's designed with monetization from the forefront, or just be really good at it. Because I cannot imagine a game really succeeding long term on just shoveling in new users through advertisements. Like, you might find that you can benefit from a little bit of advertising, but the majority of your game is coming from discovery players. Okay? So discovery users are very important. And discovery users are from really good retention rates. So yeah, let's talk about what a campaign actually looks like in action. This is the tool I've been talking about, the Campaign Duration Solver. It's this tool which I'll be linking with this presentation, where basically it can simulate different campaigns through all the logic I presented earlier. This does that automatically. You include how much your cost per player is, your budget, how long you want the campaign to go, how much of your profit you'll be reinvesting. You should also include any discovery players you're currently getting, because it doesn't solve for the new discovery users, because that's a bit difficult to predict. No, like that's I'm with you, Wrath. Like this, people focus a lot on advertising because it gets that immediate result, but they don't know why it didn't stick. They don't know why people stopped coming back, and people stopped coming back because their retention rate wasn't good enough. So yeah, marketing loses its value very quickly. I'd say that marketing is for when a game is being troubleshooted. Marketing is for when a game's in trouble. It's for when it's for when the retention rate normalizes out to basically when things evaporate. When you don't have enough discovery users to fill a full server, you get sort of the spiral. And to get discovery users, you need to obviously get initial users, because I believe that the actual I don't think that whatever system does it, it's not technically a percent. It's when I say day one retention is the key figure, unless I've misspoke, I should be talking about players, because that doesn't mean, like, you could technically get a 100% retention rate if you have one person leave and then come back and only have one person play. Like, that's a 100% retention rate. No, you need hundreds of people, if not thousands, to come back. And because of that, advertising makes sense there. So yeah, do not use advertising on a crutch, because here, people who are advertising constantly, the runway is going to run out eventually. At some point, that advertising will stop working. They'll be burning so much money on ads. They'll be doing all this stuff, and if they aren't trying to actively troubleshoot the retention rate, eventually the advertisement mechanism will fail. They won't be able to make a profit. Because here's the thing. The cost per player on average for an advertisement is around 6 to 7 to sometimes up to 10 Robux. How many games have an average revenue per user of 10 Robux? Because from what I've been able to read, only the top 25. You can see that right here. Top 25 games have the best average revenue per user. And that best average revenue per user, the peak of the entire Roblox industry, has, at best, like, if they were to put up a bad advertisement, at best, a top 25 game would not lose money. They would barely make any money at all. It's because they don't advertise. That at least they shouldn't, from what I can tell. There are very few instances. I guess in fairness, if you have a top 25 game and you have a good cost per player for advertising, like 6, every time you spend $1 on advertising, you get $2 in revenue. So in their case, it actually does make sense. But for everyone else, the top 100 people, it does not make sense. The top 250 people, it does not make sense. And below the top 250, it does not make sense. You need to have really good revenue for advertising to ever make sense as a long-term business strategy. And so no, what you need is a good retention rate, which fuels that discovery process and gets you the players you need. Because a player that is discovered, that's $0. That's a cost per player of $0. Any dollar they spend is theoretically an infinite increase in terms the ratio of how much of spending to returns becomes infinite. Now, in reality, of course, you spend time on a project and you might pay for the creation of a game, but I mean, still, if people are playing your game for free, if people are joining it for free, that's great, and you want to maximize that because the other methods just can't compete. And so, maximize your retention. And in fact, we can see not only maximize your retention, but maximize your duration. And that's because of this really interesting effect, which makes sense when you think about it. It's fully logical. There isn't any magic happening here. This is a fully solvable, deterministic world that we're working with in terms of advertising, like in retention. If you have a retention rate, and this is because if you have a retention rate of X users, but that retention rate is influenced by how many concurrent players you have, then that means to increase the amount of returning users you get, you need to increase the amount of concurrents you get. But CJ, surely having more spending on the first day, that increases the concurrents. Yes, it does increase the concurrents on the first day. But then day 2, when you're not advertising, it drops like a rock. This graph shows different campaign durations across different times, different simulations. And you'll notice that day 1, they get 400 concurrents. Bam, day 2, 50. Then it just goes down based on the retention rate. Now, if you take that exact same budget, I think I used 100,000 in this example. If you take the exact same budget of 100,000 Robux, divide it across 3 days, this is what it looks like. You get not as high up, but you'll notice that the game is actually live for a lot longer. It's live for 3 days. And then the actual gradual slope, it's like you'll notice that gradual slope is higher for the majority of the time. In fact, it's higher for, if I understand correctly, it is always going to be higher than day 1. So you will always have more concurrents up until the point where you get 0. And then day 7 days of campaigning with the same budget. Day 1, you get 80 players. Then from there it keeps going up and up and up until you get 250, and then you stop spending and it starts going down a bit and down a bit and down a bit, and then starts going to that gradual decline. And then 14 days, same thing, up, down, 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 down. But look at the 14-day one. Look what this means. Imagine your game needs 30 players to be fun. There are many games, that's a full server, and so you need 30 players to be fun. That's here. And now, between these two strategies, where you could you could choose to advertise for 14 days or advertise for 1 day, the same budget across 14 days will give you at least 17 to 18 days to improve your game. That's almost 3 weeks to focus on improving your game, to get better retention, to get better everything, to improve every key performance indicator. You have almost 3 weeks when you advertise over a longer period at smaller amounts. Whereas the person who advertises all on day 1, if they advertise it all, realize, oh no, the retention's horrible, bam, they sink even lower than this. Because at best case scenario, if they had good retention, it would have lasted them. If they had not horrible retention, which by the way, these graphs show a world where you don't get any new discovery users. This is what it would look like if no one ever joined your game for free. It's not reality, but I don't know how to solve for discovery users other than very vague predictions. and I'm not confident enough in those yet to integrate them into the tool, because I don't want the tool to become inaccurate. It just has to be accurate in its own context. And in this context, this game's in trouble. If they do not have a high enough retention rate, let's just assume that all these don't have a high enough retention rate, because realistically, if you don't have a high enough retention rate to get discovery users, this is what it will look like for you. And they, all of a sudden, when they could have had 3 weeks, they now have closer to 3 days. That's horrible. That is a horrible trade-off. They will have to solve every problem holding back their game to the point of balancing out. They have to solve that in 3 days. Don't do this to yourself. Advertise for longer periods of time. Figure out exactly how much you need to advertise to fill a server or two. 2 or 3. If you aren't confident in your game, if it's a new game, start small. Figure out if stuff's going well. And heck, if your game is doing so badly that no one's being retained, like no one's coming back, well, yeah, you don't have to keep on advertising, and you get the rest of your money back. If you do that and advertise on one day and you realize, oh no, this game's bad, you can't get a refund for that. So yeah, no. Spread out your advertising over a long period. This is supported in both this model, this simulation, and it is supported in this overall model. Because you have the campaign duration, as that increases, more daily returning users, which increases people willing to come back. And then that you basically, by increasing your campaign duration, you fuel this loop right here, which fuels this loop, which fuels this loop. Like, you fuel all 3 of your reinforcement loops with a longer campaign. That is why it's so good. That is why it is so amazing. Because you are literally hitting every single major area that you need to with a single move that costs you nothing and gives you only good things. I cannot stress this enough. But I can stress this enough in the sense that it'll get boring at some point. So let's move on to the next topic. But yeah, hope that made sense.